Since 2014, horror games have gone through a revolution after the release of PT as an upcoming Silent Hill game, before it got cancelled once and for all. This cancellation led to the rise of indie developers like never before, and psychological horror gaming became a driving force for them to produce the most creepy experiences possible, even with minimal resources. But what many people don't know is that the term indie developer is usually vague, and it doesn't refer to one type of developer. For example, games like Outlast or Amnesia are known for being indie, which is true because they're made by small teams who depend on their own funding. On the other side, there's an even more fascinating species of indie developers who usually live in the dark and operate in a mysterious manner, and they are called solo developers. These guys are the literal definition of indie because they are a team of one person working on a single computer in their own basement. But somehow, some of them manage to compose incredibly scary experiences that can even overshadow the ones made by much bigger teams. In this video, I decided to showcase several horror games that I personally played in the last few years. And they actually succeeded in giving me chills, even though they are entirely made by one person. So without further ado, let's start. In a previous video I made, I spoke about how overusing jump scares is really making indie horror games become predictable and less suspenseful. However, Summer of '58 is an exception to that rule, because even though this game has jump scares all over the place, it also succeeds in building a spooky atmosphere around them, making every jump scare seem insanely powerful. The plot plays a role in this because here you are a video blogger exploring a secluded Soviet camp in Russia that is rumored to be haunted. The protagonist specializes in exploring abandoned and supposedly haunted locations for his audience, which is why he decided to come here after hearing rumors of paranormal activity related to tragic events from decades past. These events include the murder or disappearance of multiple children who used to be here in the 1950s, and there's something about the general story and clues that pushes you to feel this place is inspired by a real location. The camp itself is a decaying structure, with crumbling cabins, rusted playgrounds, and faded propaganda posters painting a picture of a once lively place now overtaken by silence and neglect. Your main mission is to spend several nights here and try to understand what really happened behind these walls. But the catch is, you're not safe at all, and everything around you will start becoming more and more nightmarish. Bizarre entities show up suddenly from nowhere, and you can even see mysterious shadowy figures representing children who probably perished in this camp. Even though the environment is very limited and you're basically confined all the time, the developers succeeded in making me feel vulnerable, because I genuinely wanted to know what happened in this disturbing camp. And by the way, this game was made by Amnesia Games, but this name is only used for promotional purposes, and the guy behind it is Alexander Reshetnikov, a solo developer who makes indie horror games by himself. As many of you probably know, PT is a free demo that Konami released in 2014 as a teaser for a new Silent Hill game called Silent Hills. The demo created a storm across the gaming community because PT felt like a chilling experience we never witnessed in horror gaming before. But the crazy part is that less than a year later, Konami cancelled the entire project and deleted PT from the PlayStation Store and any platform on the internet, making it a chapter in history that people can never relive if they didn't download the game when they had the chance. Everyone thought that this was the end and they could never live the experience by themselves until a guy by the name of Radius Gordello showed up from the shadows in 2019. This mysterious man built something from scratch called Unreal PT, which is a precise copy of PT and aims to faithfully recreate the atmosphere, gameplay, and tension. The game you're watching on the screen right now is literally his own work and not the version from Konami, and it features the same loop in hallway premise. As usual, you don't know where you really are or what you're supposed to do here, but the radio mentions a tragic incident in which a father murdered his entire family, starting with his wife and then his children. He shot his wife in the right eye, and the radio mentions that she was pregnant during the incident, which explains why you can see a disturbing unborn baby in the bathroom sink. The main source of danger here is the ghost of a woman called Lisa, who is supposedly the wife in question, but you can never confirm this. She follows you everywhere, even when you don't see her, and the entire house gradually becomes more sinister with every loop. It's not clear why this is happening, but some clues indicate that the protagonist might be the father himself. And this whole experience is inside his own mind, because it's meant to be a psychological punishment for his crime. He's basically forced to relive his pain in an endless cycle, where he's haunted by his wife's shadow and tormented by the cries of his kids. So the real horror here is the idea that there's no way to escape, because your own mind created this prison, where you're stuck forever. There's a high chance you guys already know that there's a popular series of indie horror video games made by Chilla's Art, and they're basically about casual, normal stories with a Japanese touch of spooks. The closing shift is my favorite episode, and here you assume the role of a barista working late at a cozy yet increasingly unsettling coffee shop. The gameplay hooks you with routine tasks like brewing coffee, serving customers, and wiping down tables, which is the genius part about the game because it focuses on horror in the ordinary. Everything is set in a low-poly, retro-styled world with a VHS filter, and the scary part here is not monsters or ghosts. It's actually the suspicious customer interactions, strange noises, and a growing sense that someone or something is watching you. In other words, it's a realistic experience about what can happen to you in real life if you were in the same position working at night. What makes the game shine is how it transforms the normal ambience into a pressure machine of dread. You're not fighting anything with weapons, but your only tools are a broom and a coffee maker, which amplify the helplessness. The story in general is about a stalker lurking in the shadows, and since you play as a young woman, this adds a raw edge of vulnerability that hits hard. It's less about jump scares and more about psychological tension, keeping you always with more questions than answers. So, Chilla's art is really a brilliant indie series when it comes to showing you how horror can be in the most simple situation in your daily lives. And even though these games were not made by one person, it's still very close, because Chilla's art is only composed of two Japanese brothers making games by themselves.
And that light just turned off. What happened there? Oh, what the?
This game is beyond popular among indie horror gamers, and there's no way you didn't hear about it in the last 2 years. Escape the Backrooms is a survival horror game based on the Backrooms creepypasta, which is a concept of endless, monotonous, liminal spaces that you're stuck inside. You can play alone or with up to 3 friends, and you're basically an explorer navigating procedurally generated levels, solving puzzles, and dodging hostile entities. The ultimate goal is to find an exit through this maze of surreal, oppressive environments. But the experience includes intense mechanics like a sanity meter that drops in the dark, forcing you to scavenge for water to stay sharp. The scariest part about the game for me is the concept behind it, because the idea of an endless maze where something sinister is watching you from the shadows is seriously terrifying. This is what made the creepypasta behind this game insanely intriguing for people. The experience of being in a disorienting hellscape with no clear exit, filled with eerie silence or distant hums, can also be seen as a psychological condition that some people might suffer inside their minds. In fact, the Backrooms concept has references to real life, and it's designed after places like empty offices after hours or abandoned malls, where people can feel stuck, like in dead-end jobs or suburban sprawl. This can be followed by losing a sense of purpose or reality, which makes you feel like you don't know when you'll ever leave and go home. This is very familiar for many people because working a job that you don't like for long hours every day will eventually lead you to think that you're in a prison that you can't escape because you have no choice. This chilling notion was masterfully implemented in this game, which was entirely made by a solo developer known as Fancy, who keeps adding content to the game regularly. However, you can also find many other terrifying Backrooms games made by solo developers. This indie game is visually among the most gorgeous games I've seen in a long time, and it has a very creepy atmosphere by default. The story is unique, and it's centered around alien abductions set in an eerie Hungarian village. In this nightmarish location, you play as Sadie, a woman searching for her missing sister, who was ignored by authorities. The game blends ultra-realistic visuals with a very intense atmosphere, featuring sophisticated puzzles, inventory management, and unique weapons to bypass alien threats. The environment in this game is absolutely top-notch, with everything around you seeming like a desolate landscape with a dark, quiet climate that looks perfect for any story related to aliens. The game was entirely made by a solo developer from Hungary and is supposed to have multiple episodes, but so far it has one episode on itch.io with a free demo that you can download. It's not really clear if we'll ever have more episodes in the future, and it's been a long time since we heard anything from the developer, but the available section really portrays how high quality this game can be if he releases the whole thing. I made multiple videos about this game before, and I will keep mentioning it whenever I get the chance, because I genuinely want to see more indie games replicate its formula. I'm not exaggerating when I say that the first half of this game is basically the scariest psychological experience I've ever gone through in indie gaming. The game starts casually with you in a Russian abandoned apartment from the Soviet era, which looks very peaceful and also uncanny at the same time. Your destination here is your grandfather's apartment, number 64, and your mission is to retrieve a family photo album and leave. But the issue is that getting inside is easy, and leaving is the hard part. Your entire playthrough basically takes place inside this tiny apartment, and this is really what makes the short game incredibly chilling. The flat is precisely designed based on the Soviet era, and even though it looks very harmonious and calm, you can still feel uncomfortable inside it, for a reason you don't know. Initially, you start exploring every corner, searching for clues and observing the unsettling stuff like the ominous photos on the walls. But nothing appears to be too suspicious at this point. The real horror is not monsters, ghosts, or jump scares. It's nothing more than the oppressive atmosphere that kills you with its ambiguity. As time passes, you start to witness paranormal events around you, like lights turning off on their own or doors closing suddenly, which indicates that you're not alone in this place. This literally causes you to panic because you know for sure you're being watched, yet you don't see anyone, and you can't even leave. Furthermore, there's a dark room inside the apartment that you simply cannot enter, but you can clearly feel that it's hiding something absolutely menacing. At some point, things start to become shockingly clear when you turn around and see a tall, shadowy entity looking at you from behind before moving away very fast. Long story short, this game knows very well how to send chills down your spine without even trying, and it's mainly because it uses psychological methods like claustrophobia and the fear of unknown circumstances. The guy behind this game is known as N4BA, and he's a solo developer from Russia who made multiple indie horror games that caught so many eyeballs due to how creepy they are. A notable example is Wrong Floor, which is pretty much a shorter version of From the Darkness, and it's about a guy who found himself on a mysterious apartment's floor after the elevators misfunction. The experience is unbelievably stressful, dark, and eerie. But as usual, the atmosphere is why you're terrified. Another creepy game from this guy is Nine Child Street. And this is really an interesting one because it has bases in reality and is not really fictional. The story is about a curious child who goes to investigate a seemingly empty house of a man who was known to be living alone. The boy roams the house searching for any answers for his curiosity, but the place is very dark and disturbing, with creepy dolls all over it. These dolls resemble the shape of children, and they were made by the mysterious homeowner who works as a toy maker. The creepy part is they seem very realistic, in a disturbing way, reaching a point where you think they're real children. Well, they seem real because they were literally made from real children, or at least they once were. But what's even crazier is that this story is based on real-life events and a real man called Anatoly Moskvin. Anatoly is a Russian linguist, philologist, and historian born in 1966 in an area named Nizhny Novgorod. He grew up as a gifted child in a modest family, but he was also very lonely and didn't have many friends, if any at all. As an adult, he became fluent in 13 languages and he earned degrees in philology and history, specializing in Celtic folklore and local cemetery lore. He was socially withdrawn, lived with his parents, never married, and avoided close relationships, making him focus more on his studies. However, he lived through a very disturbing incident in 1979 when a mysterious woman took him from school to her daughter's funeral and literally pushed him to kiss her daughter, who was lying in her coffin. He was 13 years old at that time. But this incident had a huge impact on his mindset, fueling a lifelong fascination with death that reached a very serious level decades later in the 2000s. During those years, residents in the area began to notice a rise in vandalism of cemeteries, with many bodies being snatched and stolen from their graves. People also noticed a very weird pattern because the bodies usually belonged to young girls or female teenagers, which made them even more concerned. After investigating multiple suspects without reaching any conclusion, in November 2011, the clues eventually led police officers to Anatoly's apartment after linking him to years of cemetery desecrations. He was 45 years old at that time, and he was living with his parents, but after searching the place, officers were completely shocked. They found more than 20 dolls scattered across the apartment, and these dolls resemble young girls, and they're designed with traditional fabric, making them seem very real. Upon further examination, they discovered that these dolls are literally mummified bodies of girls and young women between the age of 3 to early 20s, which he had exhumed, preserved with salt and baking soda, and dressed as dolls.
Это же он здесь эти делал, да?
Да, из трупов кукол.
То есть глину там, да?
Да.
Там все девочки, да?
It turns out that Anatoly was stealing the bodies of young girls from cemeteries over the years, and these girls were mostly children who lost their lives tragically in the area. According to his testimony, he was very sad about their demise, and he wanted to bring them home and dress them as cheerful dolls in order to make them happy because he wanted them to be alive again. He also refused to apologize to their parents because, from his perspective, he didn't have any bad intentions, and his purpose was to give the girls a peaceful place where they could enjoy their time, and he even watches cartoons with them. The motives behind his actions also included his loneliness and inability to have children, which led him even more to this path. He also chose young girls specifically because he obviously never forgot the incident that he went through during his childhood when he was pushed to show love for a young girl in her coffin.
Я им включал, дайте, я их рассаживал, дайте, самое, где у них были просверлены дырочки под глазки, дайте, соответственно, я им включал мультики, я им включал детские песенки, я им сам пел песни, которые, дайте, которые мог, дайте, но потом, дайте, мы...
Long story short, he was eventually diagnosed with schizophrenia and sentenced to be confined in a psychiatric hospital indefinitely. His story terrified the entire world, and many people didn't even believe it at first, which is really why it's insanely disturbing when you play a horror game based on it. Anyway guys, this is all I have for you today. I wanted to highlight several horror games that succeeded in scaring me, even though they were made by one person with very little resources. All the games I mentioned sold a ton of copies and were widely played, which, in my opinion, should be a source of inspiration for all solo developers out there who think it's impossible to thrive alone. Give this video a like if you loved it, and let me know in the comments below if you know other horror games made by solo developers. See you next time.